Our next presenter is a public radio reporter from Interlochen and Grist. Izzy Ross has been covering the northern Michigan and Greater Lakes area about climate change and is here to tell some fun stories and why local climate change is also so incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Okay. I do have notes because I'm used to reading on the radio, so, but I think we are all set to go. Hopefully. There you go. There's me. And that's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to start right off. This is Vyacheslav Zuber. He goes by Slava. He's a mechanic in Misek, which is in northern Michigan. And he's one of the people who's hooking his shop up to natural gas. That's because Michigan's largest utility, DTE, expanded its natural gas network to the area this year. It said it would, help people transition away from fuels like propane and save on heating costs. And that project was funded by a state grant for low carbon energy. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, and this project really hit on a national debate around its place in the energy transition. Supporters say that it's a bridge fuel between dirtier sources like coal and propane and cleaner energy like renewables. But obviously it's not that simple. Many climate advocates say that we should be moving towards electrification rather than through technologies like natural gas. So I started looking into this project when DTE announced it, and it led to a story about why people are choosing natural gas. And this is a huge, it touches on so many different factors like costs and helping businesses in the area, and ease of access. And so for Slava and other people, it's not as simple as deciding between heat pump and natural gas. And it's one example of how local reporting on climate issues can break down these big national discussions and look at what people are actually dealing with on the ground. So it's really just not a simple narrative. So this matters, local climate journalism, because having access to information about what's happening in your community is critical, and local news outlets are in a position to do that with climate. When I was researching for this talk, I came across an article from MIT's Environmental Solutions Initiative, and it talked about how local journalism can be a gate to engaging people on climate change. So even if they're not super interested in thinking about climate change every day, reporting can show how other issues they care about intersect with it, and that can be really powerful. Another thing local news has going for it is that it's place-based, so oftentimes. So we are able to follow along as things develop over time, and this is especially apparent after natural disasters like Hurricane Helene. So even after national media attention shifts away from Western North Carolina, for example, local outlets in places like Asheville are going to be there for covering that story for years after that attention has shifted away. It's also an opportunity, and this I think is sometimes overlooked, to center the expertise of people in the community that the reporting is happening in and happening for. And this can highlight specific perspectives that are on everything from tribal sovereignty to health to agriculture, which is the theme I found out tonight, to education. And when community members are talking to you for a story, they're really entrusting you with their knowledge and their time. And so local journalism is also about having this ongoing conversation with the people you're reporting for. It's accountable to readers and listeners, especially in small towns, because they can literally find you and you will run into them at the post office or grocery store. And you better have like a good answer for why you reported something the way you did. And so I think that also means that you're really thinking about trust and accountability a lot in your reporting. And that can also make it more relevant to the listener or reader and also more dependable. So let's move on to what is solutions journalism. So climate change can be a little bit overwhelming, and one way to reframe how we think about it in the media is through solutions journalism. So this is looking at what people are doing to address and adapt to climate change and what the consequences of that are. So a solution story has 4 pillars, as you can see. So it looks at a response to a social problem. It also explores the evidence and behind that approach, or lack of evidence oftentimes, and it tries to offer insight into what that solution is trying to achieve. And then it looks at the limitations of a given response. So basically you're trying to look at how people are trying to solve a problem through a critical lens. And doing this locally can provide audiences with insight into the impacts of things like funding and laws and regulations, development, a whole bunch of things. So I've been here for a couple days at the university talking to journalism students, and I got a question from a professor yesterday about how I thought climate change reporting has evolved over the years, and I've only been doing this for about a year. Before this, I was a general assignment reporter, but I have been paying attention to how things have shifted and how newsrooms have shifted their approaches. And collaborations are a part of trying to increase coverage for local audiences. So my job, I'm at Grist, is part of their local news network, which aims to get climate reporting to more places and also bring that local reporting to a wider audience. So I'll do local stories for Interlochen Public Radio, and then we'll send those out to a bunch of publications, and then I will work with people at Grist to turn some of that reporting locally into a story for a national audience. So you can see this example here. It was about the bird flu breaking out in dairy herds across the country. At one point in the spring, Michigan had the most cases in the entire country. And so I did a story looking at that in northern Michigan. There were not cases of bird flu in dairy herds at the time, but farmers up north were being affected by these biosecurity requirements that the state was putting out to try to prevent the spread of the disease among dairy cattle. And then I started out with that, and then I expanded that story for Grist. And this was looking at, not only how climate change might be among a bunch of factors influencing how diseases spread between species, so that's called viral spillover, but also how scientists and policymakers were thinking about biosecurity in agriculture as a potential response to that, or a way to prevent disease spread in the industry. Okay. There are limits to what local reporting can do. This is from my radio station in Alaska, my previous job. Shout out KDLG in Dillingham. So IPR is small, it's not this small. But I think this kind of shows just some of what local reporters have to deal with. Obviously, it depends on where you are in the country, but a lot of local news outlets are really small. So at KDLG, I was one of 2 reporters. Sometimes I was the only person in the station, and we were covering a huge region in Southwest Alaska. You're wearing a lot of hats. Sometimes you're doing maintenance, so not just reporting. And you also often don't have a lot of editorial support to pursue enterprise stories and bigger projects that national news outlets might come in and report on in your region. But I do think that this also kind of shows that, despite all of these limitations, local news outlets do have the advantage of being in a community and being able to develop relationships over time. And that kind of trust with listeners and readers is not gained overnight. It's really an ongoing relationship. And I think, it takes a lot of hard conversations and always evaluating what's working, what might need to change, and how you're serving the people that you're reporting for. And so I think this is just a shameless plug for investing in supporting local newsrooms and local reporters who are already on the ground to pursue climate coverage, because they're already there. I got the light. So just to wrap up, yes, people are still listening to local news. We've seen some audience declines, but I think it's still something that people really trust. and rely on for getting information about their community and for learning more about the world around them. And I think this is incredibly important when it comes to thinking about climate change and how we're informing ourselves and how we're helping others understand what's happening in our communities. And I think with that, I will wrap it up.